Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote Notes from Underground in 1864, a work often regarded as one of the earliest existentialist pieces, highlighting the significance of freedom, responsibility, and individuality. It is a remarkable blend of literature, social commentary, and satire aimed at the Russian nihilist movement, while also offering profound psychological insights into human nature. It's no surprise that Nietzsche remarked, "Dostoevsky, the only psychologist from whom I've anything to learn, he ranks amongst the most beautiful strokes of fortune in my life." Dostoevsky's fiercest critique of the Russian nihilist movement is delivered through one of his most unsympathetic and shadowy characters, the nameless narrator and protagonist known as the Underground Man, who exposes the despairing predicaments he encounters. Notes from Underground seeks to caution against various ideas gaining traction in the 1860s, such as moral and political nihilism, rational egoism, determinism, utilitarianism, utopianism, atheism, and the seeds of what would later evolve into communism. These themes, as we'll explore, are woven throughout the novel. To fully grasp Dostoevsky's Warning, we must first consider the historical context in which it was written. In 1860, Ivan Turgenev published one of the century's most celebrated Russian novels, Fathers and Sons, where characters discuss an emerging philosophy termed nihilism, which captivated the Russian youth. Previously linked to skepticism, it evolved into moral and political nihilism. A nihilist is a man who does not bow down before any authority, who does not take any principle on faith, whatever reverence that principle may be enshrined in. Nihilist characters position themselves as deniers of everything, embodying the rejection of all established ideals. Rational egoism became the prevailing social philosophy of the Russian nihilist movement, asserting that rationality lies in maximizing self-interest, bearing resemblance to utilitarianism, which aims to maximize utility, like well-being or happiness, for all. Jeremy Bentham, utilitarianism's founder, devised a theoretical equation called the hedonic calculus to quantify happiness, measuring pleasure and pain to predict human behavior through reason alone. Dostoevsky viewed the rise of rational egoism as a serious threat, fearing that its glorification of the self might divert young minds from solid values toward a perilous, unethical, and destructive egoism. This attitude is epitomized in the line, "I say let the world go to hell, but I should always have my tea." Following a journey across Europe, Dostoevsky observed that Western culture was dominated by a principle of individuality, a principle of isolation, intense self-preservation, of personal egoism, self-definition in terms of one's own I, in placing this I in opposition to all nature and all other people, as an autonomous, independent principle completely equal and equally valuable to everything that exists outside it. In opposition, Dostoevsky advocates a return to the soil, stressing the importance of family, religion, personal responsibility, and brotherly love, where each person feels part of a whole and is willing to sacrifice for others. He champions this voluntary self-sacrifice, which cannot arise from calculations of self-interest. The Underground Man, swayed by egoistic individualism, sees himself as an educated man, a modern intellectual who has lost the ability for selfless moral sentiment. As he notes in the footnote to his novel's title, both the author of the notes and the notes themselves are, of course, fictitious. Nevertheless, such persons as the author of such memoirs not only may but must exist in our society if we take into consideration the circumstances which led to the formation of our society. Notes from Underground was crafted as a rebuttal to Russian radical Nikolai Chernyshevsky, who, in 1861, penned a novel titled What is to be done? In it, he echoes Rousseau's notion that, despite flaws, man is inherently good and responsive to reason, yet corrupted by society. Once enlightened to his true interests, reason and science could enable him to build an ideal society. A society born purely from rational self-interest, he argued, would eliminate the capacity for evil. Thus, rational egoism underpins the vision of a utopian society symbolized by the Crystal Palace, an emblem of humanity's ultimate triumph, where all woes would vanish. Chernyshevsky suggests that embracing radical socialism could transform society into this crystal palace. He also endorsed absolute determinism, or the absence of free will, which Dostoevsky masterfully critiques through The Underground Man. In Chernyshevsky's work, a character extols rational egoism, rhetorically asking, "Do you hear that? In your underground hole?" 3 years later, Dostoevsky responded with notes from Underground. Dostoevsky held that man was inherently irrational, capricious, and destructive, and that only faith in Christ, not reason, could tame his chaotic impulses. With atheism on the rise, Dostoevsky saw this as catastrophic for society, underscoring the need for Christian belief. After his death, his warnings materialized, foreshadowing the rise of the totalitarian state, a theme he also explores in Demons, an allegory of the disastrous outcomes of the political and moral nihilism prevalent in his era. The ideology of Marx paved the way for communism, enacted by Lenin and Stalin, convincing people a godless, perfect society, a golden age of abundance and equality, could end suffering. Yet, these totalitarian regimes justified murder under their ideology, leading to 20th century bloodshed. Regrettably, as Hegel noted, we learn from history that we do not learn from history. Today, the West grapples with a mass delusion, where crimes against humanity are veiled under the guise of progress, once again chasing utopia. Notes from Underground was composed as a direct rejoinder to Nikolai Chernyshevsky, a prominent spokesman for Russian radicals, who in 1861 authored a novel titled What is to be Done. In this work, Chernyshevsky aligns himself with the ideas of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, suggesting that despite humanity's imperfections, man is innately good and capable of being guided by reason. He argues that society, rather than man himself, is the source of corruption. Once enlightened to his true interests, Chernyshevsky contends, man could harness reason and science to construct a flawless society. According to this vision, a society built entirely on rational calculations of self-interest would inherently eliminate the possibility of evil. Rational egoism, then, becomes the cornerstone for the creation of a utopian society, a perfectly ordered world populated by predictably rational beings. This utopia is symbolized by the Crystal Palace, an architectural marvel representing the pinnacle of human achievement where all problems would be resolved. Chernyshevsky asserts that if society universally adopted the radical socialist path, it could be transformed into this crystal palace. He further advocates for absolute determinism, or the absence of free will, a notion that Dostoevsky brilliantly dismantles through the character of the Underground Man. In Chernyshevsky's novel, one character, while extolling the virtues of rational egoism, poses the rhetorical question, "Do you hear that? In your underground hole?" 3 years later, in 1864, Dostoevsky published Notes from Underground as a resounding retort. Dostoevsky firmly believed that man was not a creature of pure reason, but rather an irrational, capricious, and often destructive being. He argued that only faith in Christ, not the sterile application of reason, could ever hope to help humanity master the chaos of its impulses. At the time, atheism was steadily gaining ground, a trend Dostoevsky viewed as disastrous for society. He repeatedly emphasized the indispensable necessity of belief in Christ as a moral and spiritual anchor. Following his death, the dangers he had forewarned against came to pass, as he had eerily anticipated the rise of the totalitarian state. This theme is further explored in his novel Demons, which serves as an allegory for the catastrophic consequences of the political and moral nihilism that were becoming increasingly pervasive during his lifetime. The ideology of Karl Marx laid the groundwork for communism, which was later implemented by figures like Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin. They persuaded millions that a perfect godless society, a golden age of abundance and equality, could eradicate suffering once and for all. Yet, these totalitarian regimes ultimately justified mass murder in the name of their ideology, resulting in the immense bloodshed of the 20th century. Tragically, humanity seems unable to heed the lessons of the past. As the philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel famously observed, "We learn from history that we do not learn from history." Today, the Western world finds itself gripped by a collective mania, where crimes against humanity are cloaked beneath the alluring banner of progress, as societies once again chase the elusive dream of utopia. The Underground Man stands as the quintessential anti-hero, a bitter, solitary, and self-loathing 40-year-old retired civil servant who has retreated to live underground. In the original Russian text, this underground is depicted as a cramped crawl space, barely fit for human habitation, overrun with bugs and rodents. This squalid existence explains why he refers to himself as a mouse. For years, he has remained in this dismal abode, listening to the world above through a crack beneath the floorboards, scribbling his notes from underground. More than a physical space, however, the underground serves as a powerful metaphor for his profound alienation from society. Locked away in isolation, he pours out his confessions. "I am a sick man. I am a spiteful man. I am an unattractive man. I believe my liver is diseased. No, I refuse to consult a doctor from spite, that you probably will not understand. My liver is bad, well, let it get worse." Right from the outset, we are thrust into the peculiar behavior and psychological distress of the Underground Man. He describes himself as sick, then spiteful, then unattractive, and finally claims a diseased liver. He incessantly revises his self-description, as if tailoring it for an imaginary audience. Yet he struggles to pin down his own identity. Notably, he does not act in accordance with rational egoism's mandate to pursue his own best interests. He writes, "In reality, I never could become spiteful. I was conscious every moment in myself of many, very many elements absolutely opposite to that. I knew that they had been swarming in me all my life and craving some outlet from me, but I would not let them, purposely would not let them come out. They tormented me till I was ashamed. They drove me to convulsions and sickened me at last. How they sickened me." The Underground Man emerges as a chaotic jumble of conflicting emotional impulses. His central conflict can be framed as a desperate search for his own character, a quest to uncover who he truly is, though he remains painfully ignorant of the answer. This ignorance torments him, yet he recognizes it as his natural state, an inescapable condition. As a result, he seeks refuge in the world of literature, spending much of his time reading and growing bitterly disillusioned when confronted with reality. He laments, "I could not speak except as though I was reading from a book." At other moments, however, he delivers astonishingly lucid insights into the human psyche. Every man has reminiscences which he would not tell to everyone, but only to his friends. He has other matters in his mind which he would not reveal even to his friends, but only to himself, and that in secret. But there are other things which a man is afraid to tell even to himself, And every decent man has a number of such things stored away in his mind. The more decent he is, the greater the number of such things in his mind. Dostoevsky draws a sharp distinction between two types of individuals, the man of action and the man of acute consciousness. The underground man harbors a deep envy for the man of action, someone who lives life boldly, unencumbered by excessive introspection. This figure's simpler intellect liberates him from the relentless questions and torments that plague the conscious mind, while the underground man finds himself paralyzed by his own thoughts. Dostoevsky illustrates this with the analogy of the stone wall, symbolizing scientific determinism, an immutable truth, like the fact that 2 times 2 equals 4, which stands as an obstacle to free will. When faced with a desire for revenge, the man of action charges toward his goal like an enraged bull, horns lowered, driven by a primal sense of justice. But upon encountering the stone wall, he is stopped in his tracks, genuinely baffled and rendered speechless, not because the wall offers an excuse, but because it simply renders his pursuit impossible. The underground man, by contrast, resorts to cunning schemes and, rather than conceding defeat and retreating, repeatedly smashes his head against the wall, fully aware of the futility of his efforts. He reflects, "Of course I cannot break through the wall by battering my head against it if I really have not the strength to knock it down. But I am not going to be reconciled to it simply because it is a stone wall and I have not the strength," as though such a wall really were a consolation. Every potential course of action feels inadequate, leaving him trapped in a state of inertia, capable of thinking endlessly, but powerless to act. He suffers from what he considers the greatest affliction of all, consciousness. To think too much, he asserts, is a disease. This encapsulates the underground man's mental state. He is ensnared in a web of reflective hyperconsciousness, generating far more spite than the man of action ever could. The result is a profound inability to accomplish anything, rendering him a man without a defined character. He confesses, "I did not know how to become anything, neither spiteful nor kind, neither a rascal nor an honest man, neither a hero nor an insect. Now, I am living out my life in my corner, taunting myself with the spiteful and useless consolation that an intelligent man cannot become anything seriously, and it is only the fool who becomes anything." While the man of action thrives in his ignorance, content with his perceived greatness, the underground man finds a twisted comfort in his belief in his own intellectual superiority. He despises those around him, yet simultaneously loathes himself for his desperate need for their acknowledgement, a dependence that fuels his self-hatred. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe for more content.